There's a concept of what's called Shatnez, which is not mixing wool and linen together. Mm-hmm. And there is a concept called kilayim, which is not mixing crops together, mm-hmm. and not mixing also animals together. Mm-hmm. So, for example, one of the prohibitions of kilayim is taking a donkey and an ox and harnessing them together in order to plough a field, for mm-hmm. example. It's forbidden to do something like that. So they're really, even though they're very similar to each other, they're actually separate dimensions. Both of them fall into what is defined as being a chok. So maybe before we go any further, let's just work out. There are three different categories of mitzvot. Right? There is something called chukim, which are statutes. So we do them. God tells us to do them. We don't understand the depth behind them, but we do them simply because we're commanded to. There are mishpatim, which are all the civil laws. Right? So, for example, torts and damages and everything that revolves around interpersonal relationships and living together. And there is something called eduyot, which is all of the commandments mostly to do with time. So, for example, Shabbat falls into eduyot, comes from the word ed, which means a witness. It's bearing testimony to the fact that God created the world. So we've got Shabbat, we've got the festivals fall into the dimension of eduyot, right? Each one fits into its own category. The category of Shatnez, which is not mixing wool and linen, and also kilayim, of not mixing crops, falls into a chok. It's a statute. However, there is the most incredible, the most astonishing idea from Shatnez, wool and linen, right? So why wool and linen? Right, if you want to make sure that things can't be together, why not, silk and cotton, right? Why dafka those two? So Rav Hirsch, citing I think it's a medrash in the Yalkut Shimoni, if I remember correctly, but he brings the story of Cain and Abel. What happened with Cain and Abel? They were told to bring offerings to God, mm-hmm. and Cain brought flax, and Abel brought sheep. Or to be more exact, he brought the wool of the sheep. Right, flax is linen, and wool is the fleece of the sheep is wool. What caused the outburst between Cain and Abel, and Cain finally killing Abel, murdering Abel, was the fact that Abel's sacrifice was accepted by God. And Cain's wasn't, right? He became very jealous. And it's interesting, the word that Cain's name in Hebrew is Cain. Cain comes from the word kina, which means jealousy, which means that there's a certain build-up of emotion over here, which is very negative. Mm-hmm. And finally, it translates itself into the murder of Abel. So says Rav Hirsch, the combination of he's not explaining why Shatnez, why wool and linen. He's not giving the ultimate explanation of why it is that wool and linen aren't supposed to be together. But he says it's fascinating that wool and linen led to the first murder. That mixture of wool and linen led to the first murder in history. And, possibly a dimension, right? It's interesting. The reasons behind the mitzvot are called ta'amei ha-mitzvot. The word ta'am means what in Hebrew? Ta'am, anybody?
It's
Don't
on
look at
my
me like
side.
that. Ta'am is a taste, right? It's interesting that the definition of the reasons for the mitzvot are called ta'amei ha-mitzvot. The taste of the mitzvah. What is a taste? A taste is something. It's not the fundamental part of what you're eating. It's what makes it pleasurable. So, for example, when you're a kid, you get given medication that's got a sweet taste. Otherwise, you're not going to taste it. You're not going to take it, right? As you get older, you get given medication that doesn't have a sweet taste to it because you don't need that. You know that you have to take it anyway. It's good for you, right? The idea is that the ta'amei mitzvot, in order to make the mitzvot more, when you get given something to eat, right? Mm-hmm. So, first of all, it's interesting with taste. Taste is very personal, which is what's tasty for one person is not tasty for somebody else. And some people love to add extra spices to things, and some people like to have things which are not spicy at all. And everybody's got their own palate, and they eat whatever they find to be tastiest for them. But ta'amei mitzvot is the idea of giving the mitzvot a taste, giving them that sense of being delicious. right? Something which is something you can anticipate, something you can look forward to. And that's really what Rav Hirsch is saying over here with Shatnez. Is it's a tam. He's not explaining the mitzvah. It's a, is there an explanation? There is no explanation. Wool and linen, good. That's what God wants us to do. Why is that? So again, one of the reasons that I heard once before, and this is going to tie in also to the idea of crops, is that in general, I always tell this to everybody, but Orthodox Judaism, the code of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch, is pre-birth to post-death. There's not a moment in your life that's not taken up with something that you're supposed to be doing, whether it is from getting dressed in the morning and putting your shoes on the right way to all the way through your day to going back to sleep at night again. It's all taken care of inside of there, and so I once heard a reason that maybe that's one of the reasons behind why, for example, when you're planting your field, why do I have to be aware the whole time of what I'm planting and where I'm planting it and whether I'm allowed to put these things together? Because that way I'm continually tapped in to my relationship with God. Right? As I'm laying down these seeds into their furrows, right, and as I'm beginning to plant my things, then I'm continually focused on God, and I'm continually focused on doing what it is that God wants me to do correctly. Which means if that's one of the reasons, then we're learning something which it's greater than just the idea of not putting wheat together with tomatoes, for example. But it's something which is causing me to have it's causing me to focus on my relationship with Hashem. I once heard a story. It's kind of odd. There's no doubt about it. But the previous Boston Rabbi of Levi Yitzchok Horowitz, who passed away a few years ago. So he lived half the year in Boston and half the year here in Yerushalayim. He actually lived in Har Nof. And he told me this story. He said that they were having problems with the astronaut suits. Believe it or not, the astronauts, when they were getting them ready to send them up, were complaining that the bodysuit that they put on underneath this enormous concoction was actually causing it was very itchy, and they could not work out what the problem was. And you've already worked out, right? You're ahead of I am. But I was listening to this story, I was absolutely transfixed. But the Rav Levi Yitzchok, I can't remember, Rav Levi Yitzchok from Boston, I can't remember how it was they ended up coming to him, but of course Johns Hopkins is very close around there, so maybe it was through that somehow, I don't know. But he suggested that they look at what the material has been made from, and he said if there's it's possible maybe there's a combination of wool and linen together, and that might be the cause of the problem. And they checked, and there was. And they started making the stuff from something else, and everybody stopped complaining. didn't itch anymore. Does wool and linen make you itch? No, it doesn't. Speak to anybody that's ever worn a piece of clothing that's got wool and linen combined together. It doesn't cause you to itch. What caused that? I don't know. To sanctify God's name. What's called a Kiddush Hashem? I'm not sure. But in all events. That the idea that God wants us to be aware of Him the whole time. He wants us to be focused, even when we're involved in the physicality of the world. And the physicality, of course, is very important. And perhaps, again, as Rav Hirsch points out, being involved in farming is a very overwhelming, all-encompassing pastime. It's a job that you've got to get up very early. You've got to be careful with all of your crops. You've got to treat them all. Each one has to be treated in a different way. In the olden days, the people that were successful farmers were truly working from dawn till dusk, and it was very, very, very hard physical work. I once spoke with a farmer, a completely non-religious farmer, who told me something very fascinating. He said, "I get out of the ground what you get out of the books." Which means he was completely non-religious, but there was some kind of a spiritual something that connected him to the land. That was his spiritual dimension was coming through something extremely, extremely physical. And he actually told me that he gets the most incredible thrill from the land that he owns, from just picking it up and holding it in his hands and then letting it drop down back onto the ground again. And he says that's like an incredible. It gets an incredible thrill from doing that. So farming is like an all-encompassing parnasa, livelihood. And maybe that's the reason why inside of farming we've got all these additional laws of not mixing things together and being aware the whole time and being careful, and whether it's mixing animals together or whether it's mixing crops together. Maybe that's another dimension, another layer over there.
But they're described as being the word used is often translated as being an abomination, right? It is an abomination to mix these things. It is an abomination to.
I don't think it over there about if my memory serves me correct, it's not talking about crops and wool and linen, but when it talks about crossbreeding animals, that's considered to be an abomination.
Right, but that's the point. Whatever. How it's often translated, and in particular in the King James, but that's not the Torah, and that's I understand, but the way my everyday American culture describes these transgressions, no matter what they are, and the word used is
so I think
abomination.
We should steer away from the word abomination unless there's an overwhelming reason to use it. It's a somewhat dramatic biblical word.
Right.
It's a prohibition.
Right.
Prohibition, like all the other prohibitions that we've got, that need to be taken seriously, and we need to be aware of them. And hopefully, by utilizing our knowledge of the prohibitions, it's going to allow us to remember who we are. Maybe that's part of the Shatnez as well. You got to buy yourself a suit, right? So when you go look for your suit, you just take a look at the label to see what's in it. So even as I'm buying my suit, I'm remembering my relationship with Hashem, just keeping me, or trying to keep me onto the straight and narrow.
I was having a conversation with another student at lunch last week or so, and he was saying how we're having a conversation about halacha, and as you are to do here, but I was talking about the rules for Shabbos that you had actually talked about the rabbinical prohibition against carrying a pen, the rabbinical prohibition against carrying money, and the justification there too. And he was giving his understanding of what it was, and I said that's not accurate.
About it.
And anyhow. So, but he asked me if I belong to a particular interpretive group that rejects the rabbinical prohibitions and only follows Torah, right? Hey, friend, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So he asked me if I was that thing, and I had never heard of it. So I don't know. And then he claimed, for the sake of argument, I think he was just joking around. He said like, "Oh, I'm that thing," and if you wore wool and linen together, I would be justified in stabbing you. Is what he said. So apparently, according to I don't know.
Listen, I would say, I think the first thing that we're learning from over here is you should sit next to somebody else in the dinner room. That's what I think, really. Secondly, no, that's completely and absolutely wrong. You should know something. Seriously, whenever you hear something that sounds completely whacked out, so work on the premise that it's whacked out until proved otherwise. Right, which means that it's true that you will hear sometimes inside of Jewish law, you'll hear things that really do sound incredibly wild, right? And whoa, surprise, surprise, they happen to be correct and accurate. But nobody is suggesting there's a death penalty for wearing wool and linen together. That's truly absurd. It really is.
That sounds absurd to me as well, but I mean, there's a lot of things that are like, what?
Okay. So, like I said, I think that your general approach needs to be if you hear things, it's certainly from sources which are somewhat suspect.
Sure.
Right? So
Absolutely.
If you're hearing things which don't sound correct, so don't accept that as being gospel truth.
Absolutely not.
No. Until you can check it out. Yeah. Different foods have different blessings, different after blessings as well, and each one's got its own time period within which you can say it. Okay. Right? So If you are making a shahakol over something, right? So shahakol is made over anything which is pretty much not defined, right? Because everything else that's defined has got its own blessing. So if something comes out of the ground, you say Borei Pia Adoma. Something that grows on a tree, you say Borei Pia Eitz. Something that's made with flour, you normally say Borei Minei Mizonot. And then bread is Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, which is its own blessing, right? If you've got shahakol or ha'adama or ha'etz, so you're eating, I don't know, what an example of shahakol would be chocolate, ice cream, that kind of thing, water, drinks, most drinks, right, except for wine. So all of those things, at the end, you make what's called a Borei Nefashot. Borei Nefashos, which is a very short after blessing, and you have a half an hour to say it within. After you've stopped drinking, right? So, or after you've stopped eating, whatever it is, right? You've eaten something, and you've made a shahakal over it, and now you've stopped. So now you've got a half an hour within which to recite the after blessing. If after half an hour you remember that you never recited an after blessing, so fine, you've blown it. You know, what can you do, right? And you would need to make a new first blessing if you're going to drink again. So let's say, for example, you've got a cup of coffee in front of you, you know what, so it's something, coffee's a little bit complicated because if it's hot, you can't drink enough of it in one go to warrant making an after blessing. It's got to be a cheeks full, right? So let's talk about Coca-Cola for a minute because that's going to be simpler. You've got a cup of Coke in front of you and you've drunk, your cup, and you forgot to make an after blessing, and half an hour has passed already, and so you can't make an after blessing over what you've drunk. But if you want to drink more now, you're going to have to make a new first blessing. You have to make a new shahakol because everything's run out.
Several blessings. First blessing, say if you're eating something and you decide to add something else, but you didn't intend for it to be part of it, so you say another one, and then can you tie it all up in the end with just one?
Yeah. So let's say, for example, you're eating orange, and somebody brings you out chocolate, right? So the orange was Borei Pria Eitz, the chocolate is shahakol, but at the end you can say the same after blessing to wrap them both up.
Well, somebody comes out and brings you ice cream.
Same thing, you don't have to make a shahakol over it, you've said the shahakol over the chocolate, you don't have to make shahakol over the ice cream, but
if you didn't intend to eat the ice cream.
I mean, if you, again, it's a little bit complicated. If you've got a rough idea that there might be more food that's going to come out except for what they've just brought, then you don't have to be concerned about it. There is an opinion that if you had no idea that there was going to be ice cream at all, and an ice cream came out afterwards, that you might have to make another blessing over it. What's for sure is you can make the same. You can say one after blessing that's going to cover everything that you've eaten. And again, half an hour is going to start from when you stop whatever it is that you've eaten. It doesn't make any difference what you ate last, right, or what you drank last. You've got a half an hour to say it inside of. Mizonot is anything that's got flour in it, so, crackers, pretzels, pasta, cake, biscuits, couscous. Then you've now got 45 minutes within which to recite your after blessing. Okay, so let's work this one out. You had a bowl of
eating or from the blessing?
From finishing to eat whatever's in your bowl, or plate, or hands, or however you eat these things, I don't know. You had a bowl of pasta and you had a cup of drink, right? So you're going to make two blessings over it. You're going to make a blessing over the pasta, which is mizonot, and you're going to make a blessing over your drink, which is shahakol. Right? At the end of your meal, you now have to make two after blessings. You're going to have to make the after blessing of ala michya, which is the after blessing that's recited after you've had any kind of mizonot, whether it's cake, whether it's sweet, or whether it's savory, makes no difference. And you have to make a borei nefashot as well.
Which one do you do first?
You do the ala michya first, because that's considered to be more significant, and you make the borei nefashot afterwards. Okay, the exception to all of this is going to be when you wash your hands in order to have hamotzi. Hamotzi is going to cover all of your after blessings. Whatever you've eaten, it's going to be covered by the fact that that you wash your hands, you ate bread, and you're going to bench at the end, and your benching is going to take care of everything. Right, so within your meal, you've washed your hands, a Shabbos meal. You've got a whole array of different things that you're eating, right? So you could start off with some fish, and then you have some soup, and then you have some chicken, and then you have some dessert, right? All of those things, almost all of those things are going to be taken care of by your hamoitzi. And when you come to bench, it's going to cover everything, right? Even though you ate all different kinds of food. Now for benching, you have 72 minutes. The idea of this half an hour and 45 minutes and 72 minutes is to do with how satisfied you are with what you've eaten. Right, how much of an impact it makes on your stomach. Normally, when you eat with bread, certainly in the olden days, nowadays we're a little bit contrary, so we have sandwiches and we just eat on the run and they don't have the same kind of impact. But normally when you eat a meal with bread, so that's going to satisfy you for an awful long time, and then after you've finished eating, you've got a 72-minute period.
Does location matter? So you have to bench.
You should really, lechatchila, you should bench where you ate. Okay. If that is not doable, so let's say, for example, you were eating on the run, right? You were eating on your way to get to somewhere, and it's not possible for you now to bench where it was that you started your meal, so you should bench wherever you finish, right? The good news is if you're sitting in a car, or you're sitting in a train, or whatever it is, that's considered to be your place, even though your geographic location is changing the whole time, but you're sitting wherever you began your meal, that's where you're ending your meal as well. But if you want to fulfill the mitzvah in its entirety, the best thing to do is to bench in the place that you began. Right? Mizonot satisfies a little less than bread. Again, we're not talking about sitting down and eating like a whole cake. It's just something to snack on. And therefore, the period within which you can make the after blessing is going to be a little bit shorter, so it's 45 minutes. And shahako, which is considered to be perhaps the least satiating of the various foods, so that's going to be a half an hour. That's where it comes from. And again, if you want to extend your time period, let's say for example you're sitting around at a Shabbos meal, and you're having a good time, and you're singing, and you're talking to each other, and you're getting concerned that maybe the 72 minutes are going to run out, you could just eat something, a little something of anything, it doesn't matter what it is, and that will extend it by another 72 minutes. That's why you'll see very often, I don't know, Shabbatonim, for example, after the meal, before they bench, sometimes they bring out nuts, they'll bring out, jellies, whatever, something to put out that people can nibble on, and every nibble is going to extend your 72-minute period.
How would artificial things, like a protein shake that's whey protein, so it's milk, but it's derived from milk, but it's not actually milk, and you mix it in, and even the end result, the shake that you get, it's not milk.
Yeah. It really depends. It depends on a lot of things, actually. Mm-hmm. First of all, it depends on exactly what the ingredients are. Mm-hmm. It also depends on how this thing is made. Mm-hmm. Part of the problem is that sometimes you can have something which doesn't actually have any dairy ingredients in it at all, but it's being made in a plant where dairy things are being made through the same machinery. Mm-hmm. And that is very complicated halakhically to kasher something like that. Is a great big thing. The OU, which is the largest kashrus authority in the world, they have special runs that they sometimes do where you've got to clean out the whole system, mm-hmm. And that's very expensive, and lots of factories are not prepared to do that. So sometimes they'll do a special run. They'll take over the factory for a month and they'll produce whatever that factory is producing, but they'll produce it with some kind of kashrus supervision. Sometimes you'll see it on an OU box, it will say OU and then DE, which means dairy equipment, mm-hmm. which means that it's, even though the thing itself is parav, it's not dairy, but it's being used through dairy equipment. And sometimes you'll see OUD, which means it's OU, and halachically it's like 100%. Maybe it's using unsupervised milk powder, for example. Which means it's okay if somebody's not careful about drinking what's called chalav yisrael, which is milk that's been supervised, then all of these products are okay. An awful lot of the OU products, certainly they're sort of like their chocolates and things like that. Hershey bars, mm-hmm. right? That's OUD, so it's almost impossible to answer the question in a definitive fashion. Mm-hmm. Is it conceivable that you might have one of these protein shakes that are considered to be not dairy? It is possible, halachically. Is it practical? That I don't know. Right? You have to take a look and see. There are sites which sell only kosher, kosher vitamins and protein shakes and all those kinds of things, and you can take a look and see what they're, see exactly what it is that they're telling you that they're doing over there, right? whether it's got a din. So, again, it's interesting, but there's like some things are not always 100% clear, which means it's not always something is dairy or something is not dairy. Sometimes it could be, again, if it's made from dairy equipment, so maybe the thing itself is not dairy, but it can't be eaten together with something which is meaty because there's a concern, right? So it could be something that you could eat straight after you've eaten meat because it's not really dairy, right? There are all different kinds of,
I had an ice cream, a non-dairy ice cream with non-dairy chocolate, apparently, surrounding it. 2 weeks ago on Shabbos, and that was like a weird concept.
Yeah.
What has a thing, because it was made to look and made to taste exactly like, but was not.
Yeah.
So what is the distinction between?
First of all, the real
halachic
distinction is whether it's got milk in it or any kind of dairy product in it, whether it's milk, whether it's cream, whether it's butter, whether it's cheese, right? Once that's inside of it, it's dairy. The fact that it looks like it's dairy here, we had on Shabbos morning, we also had vanilla ice cream with chocolate on top. That was completely parv. Is there a problem with something looking like it's dairy when it's not dairy? It could be. The halacha has a fascinating thing where it says that if you want to cook chicken in almond milk, almond milk is this sort of like cloudy white juice, which is very sweet. It's actually rather tasty actually, but it is it looks like milk.
Right.
So the halacha says if you want to cook your meat with almond milk, you should sprinkle almonds on top of it. So that there's some kind of a visual reminder that this is not meat and milk. When I was growing up, margarine, the first non-dairy margarines came out.
Right.
When it first was invented, margarine was dairy. And it looked like slabs of butter.
Right.
And there was the rabbis, when I was growing up in London, the rabbis ruled that if you're going to use margarine in a meaty meal, you should bring it out on it in its wrapper. It should be brought out so everyone can see. Now nowadays nobody worries about these things because it's such a part of, it's just such an integral part of everybody's lives that no one thinks twice about it. Parv ice cream, when it first came out, I would imagine probably would have also have needed something like that. But again, it's been around for so long that no one's going to be concerned that maybe maybe this is milchik, maybe it's dairy when it should really not be dairy. I don't think that's people going to be concerned about that.
Why I'm having the question is because this is a thing that is made to look and resemble a dairy thing, but is non-dairy. And the whey protein shake is a thing that was dairy and now no longer resembles.
Yeah. So again,
dairy.
The only thing over here, for example, how would it be comparable if you go to an ice cream shop and they're selling parv ice cream, not non-dairy ice cream that's been made in the same equipment that the dairy ice cream's been made in. So that's a little bit like, it's a little analogous to the whey protein shake. Is it dairy? Is it not dairy? It's a question. You have to work out what's going on over there. You have to work out how it's being produced, what's happened in the interim, right? And like I said, it's certainly conceivable that you can get these things that are non-dairy. Halachically non-dairy. Again, I think we have to make a separation between what is considered to be what is considered to be non-dairy according to the FDA,
right,
and what's considered to be non-dairy according to the halacha, which are not necessarily the same thing. About 20 years ago, I never really understood this. Really, about 20 years ago, there was a fad where they would take kosher white fish, mince it up, and then they would put it into molds that were like shrimp shaped, and they would dye them pink, and then you would have kosher shrimps.
Yeah, K-Rab is is a similar. It's fake crab meat and it's that same process.
Right. So I don't, you know, I'm not 100% sure that. Lots of boys here in the yeshiva at the time, they came and they asked, "Is that okay? Is it okay to do that?" Now, halachically, it's okay to do it. Kashrus-wise, it's okay to do it. Is that what we should be doing? I don't know. So on the one hand, part of me is saying, that's ridiculous, right? All you're doing is eating pink gefilte fish that looks like shrimp, right? Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, it's like, is that truly any different from parav ice cream? Taking vanilla ice cream and taking out the non-dairy, you know, products and then serving it up. Is there an intrinsic difference between the two? I don't know. Part of me says yes, but that's because I'm not very keen on fish. So, you know, and I do like ice cream. But part of me says yes, and part of me says no. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that it's exactly what the halacha wants us to be doing. Mm-hmm. Right? Are we really supposed to be trying to mimic?
You have a soy dog with cheese on top.
Yeah. Okay. You know? So I often tell over this story. When the first time I ever went to America, we went for a bar mitzvah for my wife's family. They're very, very frum, and I'd never been there before. We arrive on Sunday, and it's Sunday afternoon, and we're sitting around, and they're going to serve up lunch, and pizza comes out, and pizza, okay, pizza, fine, and we start eating this pizza, and then all of a sudden, halfway through, steaks are coming out. And I'm thinking to myself, hold on a second, I don't know, something's not right over here. And so I'm trying to come up with all kinds of justifications. I bet that, I bet the cheese must have been parav. I bet it was non-dairy cheese on the pizza. I'm sure that's what it must have been. Anyway, it transpired that the steak was dairy. The steak was non-meaty. It was tuna steak. And I'd never seen a tuna steak before in my life. And it looked like a slab of meat, and it tasted great. It had come off a grill, and it tasted great. I mean, it really tasted like meat, and I was completely. You guys, you missed it. I was lost for words. So whatever, again, I somehow or other I do see a difference between having a tuna steak, which is just that's the way that Hashem made it, right? And taking something and turning it into something which is ostensibly not kosher, in order to what to titillate our I don't know. I'm not sure I understand. Whatever.